Happy April Fool's Day. 75 years ago, April 1st was Easter Sunday, and it was also the day of the invasion of Okinawa, which was the last, the largest, and the bloodiest battle in the Pacific theater in World War II. And if you look at a map of Japan, you see four main islands, and then trailing off to the south and a little to the west, like a little tail, is an archipelago of smaller islands. And the largest of these is the island of Okinawa. And Japan annexed Okinawa as part of its inner ring of empire in the 1800s. But the people who lived on Okinawa weren't Japanese. They were largely an ethnic group called the Ryukyu. And during the World War II and the American invasion of Okinawa, there were about 300,000 Ryukyu living on Okinawa. And the invasion on April 1st, 1945 was massive, by some measures even larger than the D-Day invasions of Normandy on June 6, 1944. It was a joint Army, Navy, Marine Corps operation. It involved landing 60,000 Marines and soldiers on one day, 4 Army divisions, 3 Marine Corps divisions, hundreds of ships out at sea, and 120,000 more Marines and soldiers would land in subsequent days. The landings at first were uncontested, and the Marines and the soldiers made their way south and north in the island, only to encounter the enemy, well over 100,000 Japanese soldiers, well dug in tunnels and caves. The battle, the combat that would ensue was unspeakably brutal. I mean, even by the ghastly standards of the Pacific War. The civilians on the island were used as human shields. And at sea, the Japanese launched thousands of suicide pilots, kamikazes, against Allied ships. By the end of the 82-day battle, almost 2,000 kamikazes had crashed either into the ocean or into American ships, killing 5,000 U.S. Navy sailors and sinking dozens of large ships. On the ground, the death toll for the Americans was even worse. Almost 9,000 Marines and Army soldiers died on the ground over those 82 days. But that was nothing compared to what the Japanese suffered. Nobody knows exactly how many Japanese were killed on Okinawa, but the best estimate is well over 100,000. Very few Japanese soldiers surrendered. A handful did, a few thousand did, but the rest died to the last or committed suicide. Civilians also committed suicide, famously and grimly by jumping off of cliffs, and also thousands, tens of thousands were caught in the crossfire. The estimate is that about half of the civilian population of Okinawa was killed during the Battle of Okinawa. It was that bad. By the time the battle shuddered to a close, which was June 22nd, 1945, the death toll was a sobering indicator of just how awful the next expected battle was going to be. And that was going to be the invasion of the Japanese home islands. So Okinawa was kind of a predictor of what it would be like to try and invade the Japanese home islands to end the Pacific War. And we've had several veterans, even many veterans over the years, come to Veterans Breakfast Club events and share their stories, their memories of the Battle of Okinawa. We had Nick Sterry, a sailor, share his memories. George Herwig, who served in the Coast Guard, Jack Morrow in the Marine Corps, Frank Steinley in the Army. But a few years ago, we had a Marine named Richard Glassbrenner, who I think kind of brought our breakfast to a quiet halt by just sharing a grim little story of just how brutal the Battle of Okinawa was. And he tells a story about encountering a dying enemy.
Okinawa, that was the last big battle of the war. The Japanese had realized that they couldn't win the war, so they were going to make it a battle of attrition. We had been on the island for a while, and my buddy Staub and I, we took a little trail off to the side, and going along, there was 2 bushes, and there was a green bottle lying outside. Well, if you see a green bottle, you figure it's probably sake. So went over there, spread the bushes, and it's a little cave. And on a litter, there's a Japanese officer. And he had been shot in the head. I don't know how long he had been laying there, but I saw dead people that looked better than this man. I mean, he was absolutely pathetic. The blood and the flies and the smell, all that. And the first thing the Japanese did, motioned to my canteen, and he wanted water. Well, usually you just shot him, there was nothing to it. But I give him some water, and he motioned to leave. And my buddy Staub, he said, "What are you gonna do?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You find him, you shoot him." The Japanese would not surrender, and those that did surrender, well, that was the end of them. That didn't make any difference whether they surrendered or not. They shot them anyhow. But they were getting ready for the invasion of Japan. If you could get officers or Japanese soldiers that you could interrogate and find out what was going on in Japan, because we already knew about the invasion of Japan. We were going to land, and they told us to expect between 60 and 70% casualties. Every man, woman, and child will be your enemy. Death before dishonor. Well, he shot at us, but he was so weak he couldn't raise the rifle, and he shot, and the bullet just went out the front of the cave. We both kicked off a couple rounds, and that was the end. Now what are we going to do? And Staub says, well, maybe we can bury him. So we dig a ditch. I mean, you say grave, but this is a ditch maybe. And we're dumping them in this is ridiculous to be able to talk about something like this, say dumping somebody in a ditch or anything. But when we put him in the ditch, his tunic come open, and he had sort of an attaché case. And then there was a wallet. And that's the worst thing you can do, is go through someone's private possession. Because in the wallet there was a picture of a lady, 2 boys in sailor uniform, and a little girl in their kimonos. That was his family. But I had that picture for years and years, and every now and then I would look at it, and you can think about this stuff, but you cannot dwell on it. It'll drive you crazy. So my boy and his family lived in Japan at one time. I got in touch with the government, and they were going to sponsor it. I would go over and see if we could find this family. But then what do you say to a person? I shot your husband or something, so that all fell through. But the picture I had for years. And one day I looked at it and I thought, what a waste. All this we've gone through, and things are no better today. So I burned the picture.
If you want to hear more veteran stories and history, then please follow or subscribe to the Veterans Breakfast Club and check out our archive of veteran stories at vbcpgh.org. I look forward to seeing you soon.